Hello. Good evening.
How are you?
Good evening. I think I can't hear you, Kim.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. That was good. How are you, Kim? Are you good?
You know, I actually have my first cold since before the pandemic, so I'm a little bit sick. I apologize if I'm a little sniffly today, but other than that, I'm doing well.
It's
How
totally
about
fine.
yourself?
Yeah, we are very good. So it's 12:30, right? 30, right? The
It is
afternoon.
12:30 here in Pennsylvania, yes, in the United States.
Great, great. It is an evening here. It is a very good evening. It is 7:30 in Bahrain, PM.
Good
So
evening, everyone.
yes, yes, yes. So how's
Mhm.
Pennsylvania? So are you in Philadelphia or somewhere else in Pennsylvania?
I am in Philadelphia, yes.
Great,
That's
great.
how I was actually connected with Mohammed, was through a fellow classmate of mine at Drexel University here in
Awesome.
Philadelphia. I'm actually getting my master's degree in marketing right now, which is just kind of in addition to the graphic design career, just kind of help me understand branding and brand management a little bit better.
Awesome. Good luck to you. Awesome.
Thanks.
Good luck. So I think we'll wait only for like 4 minutes or 5 minutes because I am accepting more people to join.
Okay,
Let's just chat, I guess, for a couple of minutes. Then
sounds good.
let's start. Yeah. So how's your MBA? It is MBA, right? No, it's called
Actually,
sorry, Masters in
it's a
yeah.
Master of Science in Marketing, yes. And I only have a couple weeks left and then I'll have that all completed and out of my way.
Great,
um,
great, great.
yes, I'm very
It should
excited.
have been fun, right? It
Yes.
has been fun too, right? To study and to learn new things.
Absolutely. Yeah. As a graphic designer, I had served on a few marketing teams and
Mhm.
worked under marketing managers and brand managers. So that's really what kind of piqued my interest in that. Since marketing professionals really work very closely with graphic designers a lot. So I thought that that would be an interesting segue, really just to expand my skill set, in this field.
Perfect, perfect. So what have you learned? What did you learn during the your study? Like you
I'm getting
learned.
my marketing degree.
Mhm, mhm.
Oh, that's hard to put in a nutshell. I've learned a lot in the last 2 years.
Yeah,
Definitely a lot more from the business side than from the creative side, which is it kind of really helps me to understand what drives the design that managers are asking of designers. Because that's, I think, one of the biggest things about graphic design is you're creating art for business and not really for yourself. So sometimes as a designer, when you're, given a project, you might not really understand the business purposes for that or for the message that you're trying to get across. So really learning and understanding of the business side of things really kind of helped me to learn what drives the design choices that a lot of marketing managers make. So
perfect. Sounds very fun. Sounds fun.
yeah. Can
So I
I
think
ask?
let's start the workshop, Kim. We have 14 people joining us today. I am expecting more, but let's start with something light. So later we can go on with the like more complex content
Sounds good.
after like 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So let's start with an introduction, then we can start the practical part maybe.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, my name is Kimberly Schmidt. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you virtually. Thank you for being here. I have been a professional graphic designer for 14 years now. I love it. It's just, I can't imagine doing anything else. I got my start in the toy industry actually back in 2007, which is something that people are always kind of envious of. They say, oh, your job sounds so fun. You get to work with toys. And that is very true. It's also a job, but it's definitely something that was, I think, a really good way to get into the field, I got to, the toy company that I worked for specifically made, I don't know if you guys have these, those little vending machines kind of at the grocery store that'll have like a little plastic bubble, and you put a quarter in the machine and then you get the plastic bubble toy out, you know, and you take it out of there. So it's just kind of these little figurines, or it could be maybe stickers, temporary tattoos. So a lot of my beginnings in graphic design was illustrating turnarounds for little figurines, which I know that was discussed in the character development workshop, kind of having to show a character from the sides and the backs. Also creating POP displays, which is a point of purchase. And that's where you're actually going to, you know, see on the vending machine itself, the actual toys and what you're going to get in that plastic bubble, because those were kind of like a mystery toy. And we also did candy at that toy company. They had a line of sugar candy. So I had the opportunity to create packaging for that. And that is actually one of my biggest passions in graphic design, is package design. And that's something I'll touch on lightly today, later in the workshop. But I just love it. I think a lot of people are very inclined to choose a product based on the package design, whether they know it or not. If you're looking at a few similar items on the shelf at a store, you know, you might actually choose the one that just looks the coolest to you. And that's something that's always been, you know, a passion of mine. So the one cool thing about working at that job too is, in addition to creating original art, we got to work with licensed products. And that's something that graphic designers get to do a lot, where, you know, we were working with Nickelodeon shows, Cartoon Network shows, some of the Marvel comics, you know, Spider-Man, Superman, DC, even sports. So we had like NFL, which is football here, baseball. So we were able to basically take those style guides provided by those companies, and we have to follow the, you know, the guidelines that they set, that their graphic designers set, to create products and keep in line with their brand and with their characters. So that was something that was very fun and exciting for me. And I'll touch on style guides later, but having a style guide for a brand is just one of the most exciting things to look at for me. And branding in general is very exciting. I'll get into that as well. From the toy industry, I moved into an agency that was actually in the food industry, and I was working on weekly publications, basically grocery store circulars. You know, so every week they would put out the sales that they were having on different meats and vegetables, and, you know, I'd have to lay that out every single week with all the different new items and the different pricing. And so that was wildly different from my first job. Then I actually got back into the toy industry for a few years. I was working for a company called Crazy Errands, and they make thinking putty, which, if you've ever played with silly putty, it's almost exactly the same. It's I know right now it's really big is the do-it-yourself slime. So it's kind of like this like gooey fluid substance. And we used to make it in a ton of different colors and effects. It would be glow in the dark, or maybe it was scented or magnetic. So that was really wonderful to work for a company where I was focused on one brand, and I had the opportunity to rebrand the company while I was there, which was creating a new logo, you know, upending all the packaging and making all that really new and cohesive. And again, creating a style guide so that anyone going forward, if they were to use our art, that they would make sure to keep it in line with what was set as a standard for the brand. So that was definitely a wonderful place to work, and I loved it. Currently, I am working in the healthcare industry. So I'm actually at an agency that is considered medical communications. So we take information not only from pharmaceutical companies, but just from doctors and other medical professionals around the world that are doing research and making breakthroughs in different kinds of disease treatment and all sorts of things in the medical field. So it's actually really fun. So it's the total opposite of my last job. Instead of focusing on one brand, we probably have 50 plus clients. So any given day, I could be working on something for GlaxoSmithKline, or now Moderna, which is one of the big pharmaceuticals. They just put out a vaccine for COVID. So it's really a lot about data visualization. And that would be like charts and graphs. So a lot of times I'm getting, you know, what looks like a very boring data from a doctor or scientist, and I have to make it visually exciting so that people want to learn the information that is really going to help advance the healthcare industry. So I think that Mohammed mentioned this in promotional materials before my workshop, but I particularly am very passionate about print in graphic design. There is also obviously a lot going on in web design right now. One of the hugest new positions that's available is the UX or UI design, and that's really about user experience and user interface. And those are things that I'm not going to really be teaching you about today. Those are things you might have learned up in some of the other workshops, but I did want to mention that they are encompassed in the general field of graphic design. And I prefer tangible items. I really like, I guess you could say I'm traditional or old school. I really enjoy, like I said, packaging, book layout. There's corporate identity where you would make business cards and letterheads and stationery for people, brochures, invitations. Invitations are actually one of my specialties. So if you're having a wedding, if you're maybe just having a birthday party for your child, sometimes people like to make fun invitations. I know that a lot of times now they're in the, just an email, evite. But I personally get about 100 emails a day, and it gets really lost in the mix. And I think with the world going so digital now, it's really exciting to get something tangible in the mail, and something that is like pretty to look at and enticing you to, come to an event or something. So invitations are definitely one of my favorite things to design. But even still, there's print everywhere. If you're driving on the road and you see a billboard, a graphic designer made that. If you're at a restaurant, looking at a menu, a graphic designer made that. So at any given point throughout your day, you're probably going to come in contact with something that a graphic designer made. And not a lot of people really consider that. There's, almost anything in the world and products in the store, were all created by a graphic designer. So it's definitely a very huge field that is necessary for a lot of companies and continuing to grow. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Yeah, I think we are good. It's very interesting so far. Thank you.
Someone asked where I studied graphic design. I actually studied at York College of Pennsylvania. So it's not really an art school. It's more of a, general liberal arts college, but they had a very great graphic design program. And the reason that I chose that as my major is because I just loved art, and I was not a very strong fine artist, I will admit. When it came to drawing and painting, I think I would say that I was probably a little more advanced than an average person who wasn't interested in art at all. But I didn't excel at it, but I loved art, and I had learned about digital art and graphic design in my senior year of high school. And I realized how important it was in business. So I decided to pursue that as a career. Software, Fatima asked me that. I will definitely be getting into that a little bit more later, but I definitely use the Adobe software programs. Illustrator, InDesign, and Photoshop are the main ones, and I definitely have a little spiel to tell you about that later in the workshop. Did you plan to diversify your design career, or did it organically happen? Definitely happened organically. Especially because, when I entered the field in 2007, we were in the age of the internet, and digital art had become, much more prominent, but it was nowhere near where it is today. And I could not have possibly foreseen how the field would change. As I mentioned with UX design and UI design, those are very huge careers right now. But web design was around when I was in college, and it just wasn't something I was ever very interested in, because it's an entirely different aspect. You're taking your art and then you're making it interactive, you're making it move, you're making, motion graphics. And I'm really more about static imagery. However, a lot of that is included in the branding and marketing management, which is like what I just came into organically throughout my career and realized I'm very interested in this. A lot of people might think of logos when you think of graphic design, and that's just one very small aspect of building a brand. For example, Nike, that's a big brand. If you see the little Nike swoosh, you know what that is. But outside of just their imagery, they have a very strong brand, and they have corporate social responsibility. So they're always trying to really convey things that are happening in the world and how they feel about it, other than just selling a product. So it's really that aspect of branding and how that works with the creativity and the art that drove me to pursue a degree in marketing. Projects. Tell me about the projects or design you're most proud of and why. Ooh, that's hard. I'll probably show you guys in a little while. Actually, maybe I can show you right now. One of the things I'm most proud of, when I was working at the putty place, let me share my screen with you. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we do.
All right, so when I was working at the Crazy Aaron's Putty World, we had the opportunity to build a flagship store. So if you guys have ever heard of the M&M store, it's an entire store with just M&Ms, which is kind of wild if you think about it, but it gives them the opportunity to really be creative and highlight their brand to the fullest. So towards the end of my time with that company, I was there for about 5.5 years. We had the opportunity to build a flagship store within our company, and I had about a month, maybe a couple weeks, to design it. They asked me to design the store. They wanted to know how the products should be laid out, how the merchandise, like what kind of merchandise we should introduce, because before that we were just making this one toy, but we're like, people like our brand, should we put our logo on hoodies, should we put it on t-shirts? So what we're looking at here, this is just a mock-up that I had created, and this is based on, this is all made in Adobe Illustrator, and this was just a suggestion. I took a picture of the actual room that we were going to be turning into a store. And I was like, okay, well, we can put, these kind of shelving, this kind of shelving here, we can put these products here. And then along the one wall, I would have all of our products arranged by color, because like I mentioned before, our putty came in different styles and effects. And our packaging was based on those effects. So the red packaging was this iridescent kind of putty. The green packaging was the glow in the dark. The black packaging was magnetic. So each one of those packages, the red package had maybe 5 different kinds of putty that went in them, but we were selling it to toy stores who really could display it however they wanted. And when we had the opportunity to have a store full of our product and nothing but our product, I thought, why not highlight the diversity of our packaging and show this whole rainbow? So in my head, I thought this would look wonderful, and I was very excited to see it come to life. And then I actually got to see it come to life, which was definitely my best achievement. So I'll show you a few pictures from that right now. We actually had a big grand opening, and we had people drive 3 hours from other states just to come and see our store and to buy some putty. So yeah, it was definitely probably the biggest and most exciting thing in my career. So you can see a little bit here. And I don't know if I have, oh, here we go. Here's a picture of the whole wall. So really for me, this was just like, wow, I just imagined this in my head. I put it down on my computer screen, and now it's real life. And people could come in and buy our product and nothing but our product. And it was, yeah, definitely something I was very proud of. The library. Oh, the library. This is fake. This is a virtual background behind me. I wish it was my library. I'm in my living room and it's not very tidy, so I thought I would use the library. Does anyone have any other questions before I get into it? All right. So when I first spoke to Muhammad about this course, we were talking about calling it the Principles of Graphic Design. And that's really what I'm going to be talking to you guys about today. But we wanted to give it a little bit more fun name. And really, this is what I came up with. So you want to be a graphic designer. It reminded me of some of the competitive shows that are on television here in America. I don't know if you guys have those, but it's like, so you think you can dance, and things of that nature. So I figured that most of the people attending this workshop are considering graphic design as a career. And hopefully I will help push you in that direction today. So really, I think the first thing that we should talk about is what is graphic design? There are many facets of art. Obviously, if you've attended any of the other workshops in the Artists for a Cause program, you've seen all the different ways that you can utilize art in the world. And a lot of those really stem from graphic design as the foundation. So I think the best way to explain it is that it is a visual communication. And if you were ever to study graphic design, you would probably take a course called visual communications. So really what I like to say is that it's art with a message and a purpose. Most often it's really trying to sell something, maybe it's a product or a service or even a person. It could be a politician, if there's someone running for president, they're gonna have a graphic designer making a logo, making posters for them. Propaganda could even be considered graphic design. If you think in the early 20th century, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this particular piece of art, but this woman, this is called Rosie the Riveter. So here in America, during World War II, all of the men were sent off to war, leaving their wives behind. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of work for women to do. They were mostly housewives and mothers. So then they were put in a situation where they had to go to work and they had to be working in factories and doing the jobs that men were doing to really keep the economy going and keep their families fed. And so this could be considered, a form of propaganda. But really it's, this is not digital. Graphic design was not always digital. It used to be considered commercial art. So a lot of it really was painted or hand drawn, and it may have been copied and reproduced, but obviously we didn't have computers, more than 50, 60 years ago. So a lot of times people will even consider graphic design to be a combination of art and text. Like I said, art with a message. So this is art. If you just saw the woman holding up her fist, you might get, you might interpret it any way that you want. But, this message in particular is saying we can do it. Women, you haven't been working, but, we have to. So now get into the field. So that's one of many ways. And of course, as I mentioned, selling something for products is one of the main facets of graphic design. And that goes back hundreds of years. One of the earliest things I could think of is Coca-Cola, early 20th century. They were making signs, they were probably painted, but they would use that as an advertisement to encourage people to purchase their product. So again, this art with a message, with a purpose. And this one particular, I don't know if you've ever seen this before. This is a famous French poster from the early 20th century. And this was just a cafe. It was a very popular cafe. But this is, I think, the heart of a very graphic image. Whereas if we're looking at Rosie the Riveter over here, she's very detailed. She almost looks realistic. But this cat, you can tell that his fur is not detailed in there. His eyes are a little bit cartoony and he's very flat almost. And that's kind of what I like to consider as something very graphic that maybe doesn't use all of the fine details that painting or illustrating might use. So basically every single day, I did mention this, every single day you're going to come into contact with something that a graphic designer made. And I mean, even a street sign, that's telling you to turn left up ahead, a graphic designer had to make that. When you receive a paycheck from your job, I actually know someone who designed paychecks. But there are many, many exciting jobs in the graphic design field. And ultimately, it is the graphic designer's responsibility to take someone's message and interpret it visually. So if we're talking about the principles of graphic design, I think it was Elliot doing the 2D animation that mentioned that if you ask about the principles of something, you might hear it differently from different people. So if you Googled the principles of graphic design, you might find there's 7 here, or there's 10 here, or there's 12 there. And you can find a lot of those things really kind of overlap. I'm just going to discuss 5 today. So some of the main things to consider in the principles of graphic design are color, balance, alignment, hierarchy, and typography. So color obviously is important. One of the main courses you take as a graphic designer or any art program is color and color theory, and really trying to understand what colors convey what messages. Blue is often seen as a very calming and hopeful color, whereas reds and yellows are something that is actually known to induce hunger. So you'll notice a lot of fast food places use red and yellow. McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, they have different branding, but they're all using the same colors. So really getting an understanding of what colors work together and what colors are going to work for the exact message you're trying to convey, that's very important. Also balance. So especially when you have multiple images going on within one image, and maybe one thing is really supposed to stand out more than others, you need to know how to make sure that there's a balance there. And that plays in hand with the hierarchy. So if you are selling something and you need to tell people where to buy it, that might be the biggest message that you have on there. And the imagery should also be prominent, but you need to decide which is the most important message here. What do I want the customer to see first? And then take the other elements of that image and kind of pare them down a little bit, maybe mute them or put them in the back. And being able to know what balance you need. Alignment, of course, if you take a layout and give it to someone who's not a designer, or maybe ask them to throw an email together, there might be something on the left and then something centered, and then, nothing really seems like it's in the right place. Being able to align, aligning text, aligning images centered underneath something, maybe they're supposed to be a little asymmetrical, but you'd know as a graphic designer what alignment makes the most sense for the project that you're working on. And sometimes you can really tell when something is off. If you were looking at, for example, a page of a book, and each paragraph, goes down the page, and they're all going to be aligned on the left. You would notice if all of a sudden one paragraph started at a quarter of an inch to the right for some reason. And maybe you do that. You could indent something as like a quote, for example, to make that stand out. They do that a lot in magazines where they'll be interviewing someone and they have all of the text very small, maybe it's in 12-point font, but they want to highlight one quote. So then they have that indented and off to the side and in a bigger font. And that's intentional. But yes, you need to make sure it's intentional and that it's with purpose and balance. Because if we just kind of have things all over the page and don't consider alignment, then it doesn't look well designed. Finally, typography. I love it. If you're going to get into graphic design, you're going to love type. You're going to have a strong relationship with type. And much like color, you really need to develop an understanding of what typography is going to convey the right message. I have an example of that later that will show you when using the wrong type for a certain message can really say the wrong thing. So using the right fonts, a lot of times if we're looking at something in business, you're going to see Arial, Helvetica, Times New Roman, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's very basic, and that is almost what you expect. If you are looking at an email or a document from your boss in a business setting, you expect it to be an Arial or Times New Roman. But if you're building a poster for a movie, say what just came out, one of the superhero movies, Black Widow, you wouldn't want to put it in a fancy cursive delicate font. You want it to be in a strong superhero font. So definitely something. There are some that are overused, and there are some that are a little taboo. A lot of people, if you talk to a graphic designer, will have an issue with the font Comic Sans. That is kind of a universal understanding that Comic Sans is no good, unless you are actually, drawing a cartoon, in which case it is irrelevant. But you wouldn't send an email to your boss in Comic Sans because it almost conveys you're joking. This is not professional. This is not this is not what I should be doing. So basically, if you have an aptitude for art in any form, you're going to have a good segue into graphic design. And I think that feeds into the question that was asked before, what led me to this career is that I really loved art, but there were parts where I didn't excel. And I think it's a lot easier to hone your skills on a computer. And yeah, so getting into a little bit to the nitty gritty here. I want to talk about the difference between vector versus raster art. So if you can see these two owls over here, this one on the top is a vector illustration that was based on this raster illustration from below. So vector graphics consist of points, lines, curves, and shapes that are technically based on mathematical formulas. You as the graphic designer do not need to know the mathematical formulas, so don't let that scare you. Those are created by the computer. Where raster art, that is created using colorized pixels. So I'm sure all of you know how an image can get pixelated. If you have, say, a picture of you and your friends, and you try to enlarge it from its original size, you're gonna see all those little squares that are put together to make up your image. With vector graphics, that is non-existent. Vector graphics do not have pixel resolution, and they can be minimized down to a half of an inch, or they could be blown up to a billboard size, or a sign that you might see in Times Square, New York, humongous, 40 feet wide. The resolution is not affected. So I'm actually gonna X out of this. Whoops. Get out of this real quick. I want to show an example of the difference. So here we have the same owl I was just showing. And this is a raster image. So this is a JPEG I found online. And this is actually for a project I was doing for my wedding, where I wanted to use this on a wooden box that I had to send to someone on Etsy. And they basically told me this is too detailed. So if you look at it, you can see the pixels. I'm going to zoom in. The closer you get, you can see all these little imperfections and all these little fuzzy bits that are used to make up the image. If you can see those, every little square, that's a pixel. So every little square has a different color in it, and that's what's put together to make this image. But as mentioned, the resolution has limits. So you might receive a high resolution image from someone that was built at 50 feet wide. In that case, it's going to look great at that size, and you can reduce it to whatever size you'd like, but you wouldn't be able to increase it. I like to make jokes about there are a lot of like FBI shows or crime shows where they're looking at a video of, maybe they caught someone's license plate, but it's fuzzy, and they say, enhance that. That's not a thing. It's not, so if you're working with a low resolution image, you're going to have to recreate that, most likely in vector, if you want to improve the resolution. And you can play around with things. So here's an example. I went into this image and I touched it up a little bit. Here, I took away some of those fuzzy bits, and that's using like a brush tool or a pen tool, which I'll show you again in a little bit. But that's just a small example of what a pixelated image actually looks like. Meanwhile, this was the recreation, and I actually traced this. In the beginning, I traced it on my iPad. I realized it wasn't working out well, and then I came in and I built it out of vector. So instead of, if you see, you can go in as close as we want, and it's still clear. It's as clear as can be. There's no resolution breakdown. And you can basically, I only have this at, let's see, this is about 5.5 inches wide right now, but if I wanted to take it up to, 10 feet, no resolution change whatsoever. And again, here is an example of the vector points. So these images are consisting of lines, and each one of them has vector points. So here's a vector point. Now I can take that and manipulate that. And that is one of the main aspects of working in vector art, is that you can take something that exists already and you can change it and alter it to how you would like it to be. You can do things similar to that with raster art, but it's just not quite the same functionality. So if I wanted to, for example, maybe get rid of this bit here, grab my eraser tool, need to make it a little bigger. Here we go. And you could remove, oh, I still have the other ones behind. You could go ahead and remove that. What am I doing here? Sorry, that's not working the way I meant it to. There we go. So you can adjust elements, but it's just the formatting and the way that you go about it is a lot different. You don't have the advantage of taking every angle and adjusting it as you'd like. You basically have to do like you would with a pen or a pencil, and intricately go in and change things. And some people prefer to work this way. as a graphic designer, I've worked on teams with many other graphic designers, some of which really prefer to work in Photoshop. But again, that depends on the image that you're given, and you're more likely going to want to work in vector graphics whenever you can. What I'm showing you here is a very simple vector image, but you can actually build very, very detailed imagery with vector, including, you know, shadows, gradients, all sorts of tiny details. It just takes time, of course. And so this is one of the things I highlighted from Dennis's workshop, the character development and storyboarding, was that he was talking about building characters with shapes. And that's something that's actually very common in graphic design, especially with vector art. So if you can tell, that's how I built the body here for this owl. So his head is made of a circle, his body is made of another circle, his feet are made of circles, etc. And it's just very easy to manipulate a shape. Say you start with a circle and you want more of an eye shape. And it's going to be really hard to get into all of the tools today, but there are lots of tools that you can adjust the imagery with. Like this one, for example, that removes any curvature on the vector point and makes it basically a 90-degree angle. So now I can just pull these out and I have a little bit more of an eyeball shape. And you can go ahead and mess with the curves on that. So it's almost nothing like drawing with a pen or a pencil. Some people, you know, really excel at drawing in a traditional sense and really can't wrap their heads around this. And in a little bit, I'll get into more about how you can actually translate a hand-drawn image into a vector image and then really manipulate it more from there. That was a very helpful tool that I learned actually in the beginning of my career. I've learned a lot working in the field, more so I think than I even learned getting my bachelor's degree. So there's something to be said about working on a team, working with other designers. I think it's always good to work with people that are similar to you and have similar fields, so that you can actually learn from each other and grow together as designers. Because I think I've definitely learned a lot from my peers throughout my career. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that real quick, and I wanted to go over this while we're talking about it. No, not play from start. Whoops. So this is another big one. The difference between CMYK and RGB images is very important in graphic design. Now, CMYK is designated for print. That is using the colors you see here. This is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So if you've ever had to put toner into a printer, or probably the printer you have at home, you might have a black one and then a colorful one, and the color one is going to have cyan, magenta, and yellow in it. If you're working for a corporation that has a large scale laser printer, you're going to have these massive toner containers, one for each color. And basically what's happening is those are the colors that are being put together to compile and make any color that you create on your screen. So if you are building something that's navy blue, you might use 100% of cyan and 80% of black to build that color. If you have a color that's more purple, you might use 50% cyan and 50% magenta. And you have from 1 to 100 on each of these colors, and you have a variation that you can add of each one to build the colors that you want. That being said, CMYK printing can actually be a little bit limiting. There are certain colors that cannot be achieved with CMYK. And then you would actually turn to Pantones, most likely, which I have not listed here, but that is a very expensive line of inks. I'm sure you've heard of it at some point. They do a color of the year every year. A lot of big companies will designate a Pantone for their brand. For example, Nickelodeon, I know this from my first job, uses Pantone 021C. That is their orange. They will not use any other orange. And the reason that you use a Pantone is because any Pantone printed on any printer is going to look exactly the same. Whereas if you just chose an orange color, it might come out a little bit differently depending on what printer you use. If you're using an inkjet, if you're using a laser, if it's a different brand, just the way that the toner is applied to the page might not be exact as to what you were looking for. So that's why a lot of larger companies will use a Pantone color, because that is, every single color has its own ink. If you see a Pantone printer, it's full of 1,000 little toner cartridges, and that's not something that an average person can have in their home, which is why it's very expensive. Alternatively, web images and anything that you ever see on your computer screen or on your TV screen even is built out of RGB, and that is red, green, and blue. This might seem like it's more limiting, but it's actually much more expansive. You can see and build a lot brighter colors with this, and that has a lot to do with the light that's coming from behind it as well. But if you would ever, and not that I recommend doing this, do not do this on purpose, but if you've ever accidentally gotten a drop of water on your screen, you might actually see a red, green, and a blue lights or circles. It almost magnifies and highlights that. And it's really hard to actually see with the naked eye, but if you were to zoom in and magnify, a small portion of your screen, you would just see a red, green, blue, red, green, blue. Now, one thing with that is that, like I said, it doesn't translate well. So if you are planning on building an image, you should know ahead of time what format you need it in. If someone is seeking out an image for screen purposes, say they want to put it on their website or they want to put it on Instagram or social media, RGB is what you want, because you're going to be able to really convey more colors, a lot brighter colors. So I just want to show an example here. So this is an RGB image of limes, and lime green is probably the trickiest one to achieve with CMYK. So if I wanted to print this, it's not going to look anything like this. On the screen, it is nice and bright, but here's what happens when we take it from RGB to CMYK. Ready? So this has, even though we're still looking at it on the screen, the software is taking the information and rebuilding it with the CMYK color coding to make it optimized for a printer. So they don't have that green in the red, green, blue. There is no green in CMYK. And yes, there is cyan and yellow, which come together to make green, but it doesn't quite have the same effect. So like I said, when you're getting ready to build an image, it's very important to know what the end result is for. And I always recommend, if something is meant for print, that it be built in CMYK to start, because you don't want to kind of get your hopes up about some kind of bright, vibrant color that can't be achieved. I have an example actually from when I worked at Putty World. We had put out a line of neon putty. See here. So this is a package that I created for the putty company that I worked for. And the putty itself was neon. That's something that's easy to achieve. That's used with pigments, mixed with, silicone, and they can basically do whatever they want. However, when I went to print the package, my managers really wanted me to print it in CMYK, because using anything else was going to be a lot less cost effective. And then we got the prototypes back, and it was a little dull. For something that you want neon, you want that bright vibrance, you can't really expect to achieve that with CMYK. So we ultimately went ahead and used a special set of neon printed inks from our printer. We worked with them to, come to a compromise, without using Pantones, because like I said, they're very expensive. But there's a lot of printers out there who have a lot of innovative and different kinds of inks that they can use. It's just a matter of what you can actually do in your own home versus what you can do on a larger scale if you're part of a bigger corporation or company. So just keeping that in mind, those are some of the fundamental, very important aspects of, understanding color, understanding vector versus pixels. That's one of the foundations of graphic design and graphic design art. So as someone asked me earlier what software I use, and I mentioned it briefly, but I'm just going to say it again. It's Adobe, 100%. There are a few other programs out there for drawing. I remember seeing, I think it was Corel Draw was something that was required on a lot of positions I was looking for years ago. But it was a very obscure program. And and that's not to say that there shouldn't be. I don't think that Adobe should really have a monopoly on all of these programs, but they are the most compatible. And you're going to be able to achieve, you know, the most different aspects of design by using these programs, because there are so many, they're so widely used, and they've been doing this for decades. I first learned how to use Photoshop in 1999. I remember I was in a regular old photography class, you know, back when we used film, and I was developing film in the dark room. But we also had some computers, and my teacher, you know, thought, why not touch on this Photoshop idea? So we would actually take images we created, you know, or that we took, photographs we took with film, and then translate them into the computer and manipulate them in Photoshop. So Illustrator is the vector art program. What I just showed you with the vector points, that's going to be Illustrator. That is my #1 program. It's my favorite thing to use. It's definitely considered a drawing program. That's where you're going to be, as the program is called, that's where you're going to be illustrating things. Photoshop is for the raster art and for the pixel-based art. So you're going to do mostly photo editing there. If you have a real life photograph, maybe you want to clip someone out of it, maybe you want to double something up in there, maybe you want to touch up their skin, anything like that. That's going to be done in Photoshop, manipulating pixel art. And then InDesign is actually a underrated but very useful tool for layout. So I actually only used InDesign very sparingly in the beginning of my career. And then at my current position in the healthcare industry, I've been using it a lot more, because we do a lot of brochures and publications, scientific posters that are at medical conventions, and they require very meticulous alignment and layout. And trying to do that in Illustrator, you can, and there are times in my career where I have laid things out in Illustrator and then quickly realized that it really wasn't easy to keep everything in line. Whereas InDesign really helps you to keep everything aligned, keep text cohesive. You can set a paragraph style, you know, so maybe if you're gonna say you're writing a book and the chapter headers of every book are supposed to be 24-point font. Museo slab, you know, is the name of a typeface, and it's supposed to be bold. You could set that as your header font, and then every time you get to your new chapter, you type it out and then you click the paragraph style and it automatically sets it to 24-point Museo slab bold. So having those kind of like automated tools really helps to do things efficiently and to keep everything cohesive. Now, I did mention earlier, and I'm not going to get into these, but there are, you know, a lot more software for design outside of what I'm really familiar with, and that's mostly for web design. A lot of web design is really based in HTML and coding, which is something that is totally foreign to me. But you can also build web designs in Dreamweaver, which is one of the older Adobe programs. But that's going to be more from a design standpoint, and it might be visually pleasing, but it might not have the functionality as well as something that was coded properly by, you know, by a web designer or any other program. There's also something called Adobe Spark, and you may have heard of this before. It's actually very useful for non-designers, I would say, to build things such as infographics. And if you haven't heard of infographics, it's actually just a short visual that's basically trying to convey a lot of data in the smallest amount of words possible. Because unfortunately, a lot of people in the world have very short attention spans. And if you throw a big paragraph of text at them, they're not going to read it. But if you use a few icons, which you may have seen recently, what I even had them in one of my, let's see, sorry, I didn't mean to go backwards. This here. These are, you know, icons. They have become very popular recently, especially because they're very well translated across any language barriers. You know, if you're looking at this, you know, I'm talking about art and painting. If you're looking at that, you have a general understanding of the idea of balance. You might not really need to know what that word below it says. So Adobe Spark is a program that will help you to create things like that infographics and visual information that's going to help simplify a message that, you know, your manager or your company might want to convey. Likewise, with the UX and UI fields, really, they're, like I said, they're focused on the user experience of a website and making things user friendly. And they would probably use Adobe XD, which is a newer program. And that's really going to help with all of those little nitty gritties of making things useful and making things easy to navigate on a website. I'm sure you guys have been on a website where you didn't really know where to click and it was, you know, not well put together. But then when you're on a website that is well designed, you know, it is easier for you. You can tell when the UX people have done their job, when you can navigate through a website without like scratching your head, you know? And finally, there's animation and motion graphics, which I know was touched on in some of the other workshops here. That would be used in websites, on social media, on television even. And the programs for those, the best programs for those in terms of Adobe, would be Adobe Animate, which I know Elliot mentioned this in his workshop, that Adobe Animate is actually for drawing. So when I was watching Elliot do his work in there, it looked like Illustrator to me. It's almost exactly the same in terms of the tools and the format, where you're just drawing something. But then the alternative is that you have frames that you can, you know, take those drawings and animate them. Alternatively, Adobe After Effects is another motion graphics software, but it's meant for adding motion to existing imagery. You're not going to be drawing something in After Effects. All right, so I want to show you guys a couple of important tools and features from each one of these three programs. Like I said, there's no way I could possibly teach you all of them. I don't even know all of them. I'm still, they make new tools almost every year, and I learn about them and, you know, try to keep up with the field and the ever changing ways to do things. So let's see. Trouble getting out of here. All right. So one thing I wanted to show you guys is Pathfinder. So Pathfinder is something that I find very useful. If you look at this shape here that I made in the owl's face, I had to make sure that those were, you know, two equal shapes and that they came together in the right spot. And you could sit there and you could draw each circle, but they might be a little off-centered. They, you know, and you could go in later and align them. But there's one tool that's very helpful for that. So let's say we're going to build two circles and we want to turn it into that shape below. So you take the first one, you can repeat it next to it. I'm going to take this off. So right here and right now, it looks almost like it's the same, like it's joined, but they're still two separate circles. And you can see that they share that middle space. Sorry, I have to move my program in. So the image trace tool, I'm sorry, the Pathfinder tool gives you the opportunity to take these two shapes and make them one shape. So I'm going to go to my Pathfinder and I'm going to do what's called a merge. So now those two shapes have become one shape and I have what I need. And there are many other versions of that. So say I wanted there to be eyeballs in the middle of it or something. And I could start with them being, let's give them a color. So now there's a few different ways to do that. If you wanted to have an image, a color on top of that color, that's fine. You could do that just like that. But maybe you want to have it knocked out so that that shape actually has holes in it, like a donut or a pretzel. And you know, if there was a background behind it, you'd want to be able to see that background through it. So let's make the background pink or magenta. So right now, you see the shape on top of the shape, but we want to make it so we can see through it. So I'm actually going to take these two shapes. First, I'm going to start with this one. I'm going to go back to the Pathfinder. I'm going to do minus front. So that actually takes that shape now and removes it from the bigger shape. And we'll do the same thing over here. And now that's what we have. We basically have a figure 8. And anything that I run that over, you're going to be able to see through it because now that is actually knocked out of that shape. This is something that becomes useful in a lot of different ways. I can't even begin to explain, but no one showed me this when I was in college. So I wanted to show you guys some of the tools that I feel like I learned about a little bit too late, that were extremely helpful to me. The Pathfinder has a few other options where you can divide things. Let's say we do it like this and we divide. So all of those shapes are still there, but now this cross piece, I can make a different color. I don't have my color swatch open on this, but let's say, yeah, like that. So that's a fun way to keep your shapes together. Or if you were doing a Venn diagram or something and you actually needed the intersecting pieces between the two to have a different color, for example. So we could do that again. We'll go back to the Pathfinder and we'll divide it. And it would be, let's see, pink plus, we're going to do like a actual color. So the pink and the blue together would make purple. And this is what I was talking about earlier. If you can see here, this is my CMYK build. So I'm choosing these colors by allotting a certain amount of that color. So this is 100% cyan. This is 100% magenta. But now I'm taking half of each to make a middle point color. And you can do that with, endless combinations. So that is one thing I find very useful. Another thing I wanted to show you is image trace. So like I mentioned earlier, if you are building something, say you're just much better at drawing with your hands and you can't fathom illustrating anything with a mouse or using shapes or anything like that. But maybe you have an iPad, or even if you draw with pen and pencil. I used to do this all the time with pen and pencil drawings that I would do. I would do it on paper and then I would scan it in and bring it into my computer and manipulate it from there. I'm going to use an example today. This is a very silly drawing I did of a vampire from the movie Interview with the Vampire. So I created this on my iPad. I was just doodling one day. And right now, this is a pixel-based image. So if I were to zoom in, zoom, you can see the pixels. You can see all the little squares that are there making it up. So if I were to take this image, like I said, I couldn't really blow it up to be much bigger. I couldn't do too much manipulating with it. I could take it into Photoshop and play with the colors and play around with it, but the resolution situation is still going to be the same. However, if you have an image that you've drawn, and this works with both full color and simple line work, it works better with simple line work, but for this example, you're going to see how amazing this is. This is the tool that no one taught me in college, and when I learned about it afterwards, I was just blown away. So you select your image, and then we're going to go to the image trace tool. This is where you would select what you're using. If you're just using black and white, you want to stick to black and white because it's only going to recognize those colors, and that's all you need it to recognize. But we're doing a full color image, so we're changing the mode to color. And I'm just going to hit preview. And for this particular example, because I've tested it, I know that it's not really going to change visually when you first see it. I can show you another example actually with the owl in a minute of how it will actually alter the pieces a little bit. But sometimes it does a really good job, and it actually has every little curvature and every little piece is exactly the same as you drew it, depending on the level of detail. So let's just give it a minute. It's got a curve fitting, this and that. Okay, so right now it looks exactly the same. But now we're just going to go to the object and we're going to expand it. And what that does after we've done the image trace is turn this into a vector image. So even though I was just looking at pixels, now look at that clarity. This is a perfect vector and each piece is separated. I can actually take that apart and that's a whole different shape. If I wanted to, I could just recolor those like that. And now you've got those points and lines. If you think maybe this is a little too smooth, maybe it's thicker in some parts, you could go in and manipulate that just like you could a regular vector image. And like I said, some of these capabilities are something that you could do also in Photoshop, but having that vector really gives you more leeway with what you can do, and it gives you more freedom to change things. So I'm just gonna make I'm just gonna make a little set of twins real quick. But that, yeah, that's just something that I wish I knew earlier. I learned it relatively earlier in my career, but it's definitely something that's been helpful. So if, like I said, if you're really good at hand drawing and you think you can't really translate that to the computer very well, you can draw it by hand, scan it in, or if you have it on an iPad, just send it to yourself in your Adobe programs and use the image trace. Sorry, it sounds like my fiance just broke a glass in the kitchen. Anyway, but let me show you real quick. I'll pull in another image just so you can see how differently that works with something like, because look at what I said. I had drawn that image in on my iPad. So the actual pen tools that I were using were very much more conducive to being traced into a vector. But if we take, for example, the original owl, so you can see the direct comparison here of how much detail has been removed in my redraw. And I originally wanted to try to get that detail in there. So I tried the image trace, and I'm going to show you how it can, you know, not always work perfectly. So now we're going to, oh, here we go. So I have it on black and white now because it's not a full color image. We're going to let it do its thing. So you can see it definitely changed a little bit. Go back. So see that pixel and do the close up. You can see the pixelation. You can see the way that the shapes are set up. But once you apply this, they're altered a little bit. So because it's so much detail, so many curves, so many little lines, it's going to change it. And you have the opportunity then here in the advanced part of this tool to go through and adjust the levels of how it's affecting things. So that maybe the paths have a little bit more pixels in them or less pixels in them. Less pixels would make for a smoother line, whereas more would create those little hairy curvatures there. Corners as well, that's going to give you more actual pointed corners. And if you take it away less, then you're going to try to round those out. And it's kind of hard to see with this complex image, but you can still take that and expand it. And now you've got a full vector. So something like this is much more complicated than what I've seen. If you look at that, every little blue dot is a vector point. Whereas if we look at our owl above, there's only a few. There's one here, there's one there, there's a few. So that's what's leaving those much smoother lines. And that's the main difference again between the vector and the pixel art. So those are probably two of my favorite tools in Illustrator. Now let's look at Photoshop. You know what? I'm actually going to pull in a photo. Forgive me, I just need one moment. Tried to have as many things open as possible before the workshop started. All right. So one thing I'll show is the rubber stamp tool. This is one of my favorite tools in Photoshop, and it can be used for a lot of things, but it's mostly to get rid of something that you don't want. Like I probably should have used this as an example, but when I had my engagement pictures taken and I had burned my arm on my curling iron. So I had a little bit of a burn mark on my arm in my engagement pictures, and I was using them for a Christmas card, and I didn't want anyone to see that. So I used the rubber stamp tool to basically take a patch of my skin and put that over where the cut was or the burn was, so you couldn't see it at all. And here's an example of that in use. So what you're doing when you're doing the rubber stamp, and you can choose a different size for your brush, is you're actually, so you hit option and you select. So I'm selecting this pink area and I'm going to run it over this white. So we're just going to get rid of the white stripe. And what's that doing? If you see where the little plus sign is, that's actually taking the pink from that area and laying it over top of the white stripe. So you can use this for so many different purposes. I wouldn't recommend it for airbrushing. There are definitely some different ways to airbrush a person's face. If you, for example, have a lot of acne and you want to make your skin look smoother, I suggest a Gaussian blur for that, but I'm not going to get into all that today because that's way more complicated. But yes, and you'd want to continuously grab from a new spot because it's going to move. So if you see, it's not going to just take it right here's where I'm grabbing from. It's not going to continue to take it from that spot. It's going to continue to take it from that distance from the brush. So if you see the plus sign moving along, it's actually grabbing it from the pink that's right underneath there. If I were to move it up, it's going to take the yellow. See? So it's really grabbing it from whatever's below. Now I'll grab white if I go over here. So this can be very useful for, like, if maybe we want to get rid of these clouds on the top here. So let's make this a little bit bigger. And we'll go to where the blue sky is. And we'll just get rid of some of those clouds and make it look like it wasn't such a cloudy day. Something like that. Just, this is the kind of photo manipulation you might be asked to do for many different reasons. Just get rid of that, you know, get rid of some other thing. So that's a very useful tool, the rubber stamp. One of the other, I think one of the main tools used in Photoshop that is actually now being recreated by some simple apps that you can get on your phone, but they don't quite do the trick, is just to crop something out. So I would suggest usually using the lasso tool, and there are a few different ways to do that. I like the polygonal lasso tool, which allows you to create almost in points like the vector. You move it and then you click it and you make points in a rigid shape. And then that actually selects something. So let's say I will run along this stem. Okay, and now I have the stem selected, and maybe I would want to adjust the color of the stem or something. I can make it look like it's blue, or maybe it's a little bit yellower, and that's only going to place that effect on the thing that you have selected. Or likewise, you can just delete it altogether. Let's see if I can, excuse me. So I could just delete it. And that's that. You can always, my favorite thing, I probably should have mentioned about all of these programs, is the ability to undo what you have done. So if you're drawing or painting and you mess up, you know, maybe if you're using pencil, you can go back and erase it. But the best part about working, you know, in these software programs is that you can always go back and undo what you did. So let's go undo that. And so the lasso, like I said, that is a very clever and unique way to go in and actually, you know, select things very meticulously. And I like the polygonal lasso tool, like I mentioned, but there's also a much more fluid one, the regular lasso tool, where you're just drawing normal. You click the mouse and you flow it along. I find that I have more accuracy when I use the polygonal lasso, but that's, you know, everyone's preference really. Okay, now alternatively to the lasso tool, because we have this particular image, the piece that you would probably want to crop out, of course, is the flower, and it has such a solid background behind it that you can use what's called the magic wand tool. And this only works when you have a very high contrast like this, the orange against the blue. Those are literally complementary colors, so the contrast is very high. So when you have that kind of image, you can, instead of wasting all your time with the lasso tool, you take the magic wand tool and, well, I'm just gonna, hold on, we're gonna increase the tolerance here to 35 and look at that. It just selects the whole background, and then we can go ahead and just delete it right out. So I would say that's one of the, you know, one of the more highly used tools in Photoshop, in addition to the airbrushing and everything, but there are endless amounts of things you can do with this program. So I recommend playing around with it if you get the chance. And finally, we'll look at quickly a brochure in InDesign. So this is a brochure I did for a freelance client of mine last year when I was freelancing. And this is what I was talking about before with alignment. So what we're looking at here is a lot of text. It's not, you know, a visually pleasing image, but it's very well aligned. You can see that, you know, the different columns, everything is on the left where it should be. And it's very clean. So what we have here in InDesign are, you know, and you can do this in all the programs, but this allows you to create margins and rules where you can keep everything contained. And oops, sorry. It makes it a lot easier. For example, if you were to fill this, I'm just gonna, oops. Let's say that this part of this text, my InDesign is moving very slowly, I apologize. Let's say that this text was actually at the end of this. So if I were to pull this text box down, you can see that the text continues, but we theoretically don't have enough room for it here in this column. So InDesign allows you to create text and columns that flow together, especially that, you know, when you don't have room for it. So there's this little plus tool down here. And I'm going to click that. Then I just click into this text box and it basically continues the text from the previous box into that. And if I were to make any adjustments, say to move a whole paragraph out of here, that would be affected because they work together. So this program is very useful for, like I said, anything that has a lot of strong layout where a lot of text is working together with images. You're not really going to draw anything in here, and you're not going to edit anything like you would in Photoshop, but you're going to use those images that you've created in Illustrator and in Photoshop and bring them into here. So I just realized how much time we have left. I really thought we had much more time. I've been talking a lot. So next I wanted to just quickly get into logo design. And Mohammed, do we have time for a quick assignment? So for now, I'm just going to talk about logos. Logo design, I think, is something that a lot of graphic designers aspire to do. It's not something that you're always going to get an opportunity to do in your career as a graphic designer, depending on what career you choose. For example, when I worked for Crazy Errands, I was focused on one brand, and I did get to redesign the logo at one point, but then that was that. You know, you're not going to be designing another logo again. Whereas if you're a freelancer or if you work for an agency, you might be connected with new companies or companies that are rebranding all the time and have an opportunity to update their logo. But basically, I just wanted to point out that, you know, what a logo really is. And it's just a symbol that represents a brand. It should be simple, but impactful. And I think there are a lot of companies that don't seem to realize that, especially if they don't have a good graphic designer. If you think of some of the best logos out there, the ones that you could think of, you know, off the top of your head, they're going to be very simple. Target, for example. I'm not sure if you guys have Target in Bahrain, but it's just two red circles. But, you know, if you see it, you know what it is. Nike, it's just a simple swoosh, but it conveys movement, and it's been around for so long and it's such a strong brand, you know what it is. And Apple, of course, I am a very big connoisseur of the Apple brand, and their, you know, logo has changed over the years. It used to be full of rainbow stripes, and you know, they took it basically to its simplest form, and everybody loves it. So these are really good examples of perfect logos that are very simple, very impactful, and really can help you to recognize a brand without even accompanying the name of the brand itself. That's something that's very important. And that also has a lot to do with, like I said, the actual branding and how the company is doing in terms of recognition. But having a simple logo is definitely going to help with that. So sometimes it's best to start with something complicated and take away details until you're left with the simplest form that still conveys the image. So I'm going to use an example here, and I did not actually draw these things, so just FYI, and they're not related. I actually pulled these off the internet just to give you guys an example. So here we have a bullhead, and say you had a company that maybe it was called Bullhead. So you might start out with something like this. This is a very detailed image. There are a lot of lines. There's the fur is conveyed with different little strokes. He's got yellow eyes. You can see his nose, everything. So this is a beautiful image. It doesn't make a perfect logo. If you had to put this at 1/2 of an inch on a business card, you might not be able to see what it is anymore. Whereas if you saw the little Nike swoosh, it didn't really matter how small it is. It's the same. It looks the same to you, and you know what it is. You're not missing any details because of the size. So here's one step down from that, you know, where you take away a lot of the details. You take away that fur and all of that, but you still have the eyes. You still have the nose. You still have a little bit of, you know, the cut in the face here. And this is a good middle point, I would say. But I would take it one step further and just kind of, again, just simplify it and take away all of those details till you have, you basically have a shape. It's a very simple symbol, but it's bold and it's impactful. So yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out, Mohammed, do I have enough time to give out an assignment, you think? Oh, I can't hear you. Are you muted? Sorry, Mohammed, I think you were muted. What did you say?
I'm sorry, I'm very sorry. I think we have 10 minutes to go, like for that exercise. Then we have 5 minutes for questions. So I think
Okay.
10 minutes is good. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. I didn't realize that this was going to take so long. I had a few more things to touch on, but that's all right.
Yes, this is fine. Yeah. Thank you.
So I'll just show you guys real quick my logo. So I wanted you guys to basically create a logo either for yourself or maybe for a company that you make up, or maybe you want to redesign a logo for someone else. So right here, this is my logo. My handle on Instagram, for example, is CMY Kim. And that's because I love print, and I'm making a pun on the CMYK thing. So when I really wanted to kind of brand myself, I thought, you know, how can I take that and turn that into a simple shape that's going to convey me and who I am? So I used the cyan, magenta, and yellow colors. And basically I played with the negative space here where I put these 3 triangles together. And if you can see, it's forming the letter K. Now CMYK is a little strange. The K stands for black. Only because the B in RGB stands for blue, and they didn't want those things to be confused. But I thought it was interesting that the K was used because my name is Kim, so that made it very easy for me to translate this into something that stands, you know, that represents me. And I have that on my Instagram page. I have it here on my resume, and here on my website. So I wanted to give you guys maybe 5 to 10 minutes to just, you can use pen and paper. You don't have to use you know, anything digital. If you have an iPad, great, you know, play with that. But, you know, think of, you know, how would you want to represent yourself as a brand? And you can use just typography, really, your initials maybe, or just, you know, a simple shape or color. But if that's a little too challenging, like I said, maybe make up a company real quick. Maybe you have like a sunglasses company or a cafe or something of the sort that you want to make up. And, you know, how would you create a logo for that? Or if you, maybe, you know, the Starbucks logo, maybe you don't like that. Maybe you would do it differently. So yeah, just take a few minutes and try to work up a logo.
So every one of us just use pencil, right? To design his or her own sketch of a logo, right? That's it?
Yeah, pen and pencil works.
Can I show my logo?
Yeah.
Yes.
You have one?
I have logo already.
I would love to see it.
Can I share my screen?
Yes.
Yes, you can.
This is my logo. It's typography logo for my Instagram page.
Love it. That combination of the script and the sans serif type is wonderful. That's something that I really appreciate, when people can make 2 different kinds of typefaces work together well. And you've done a really good job of that here. I like that.
Thank you.
So any tips or comments, Kim, on that logo? Like, or feedback?
The only thing on this logo I might say is it does look like the D, it does look like the alignment of the letters is a little bit off. It looks like the D is a little bit higher than the E. So if you could, you know, you might want to put, take your guides and put a ruler on the top and the bottom so that those letters align from top to bottom. Unless that was intentional, in which case, you know, leave it that way.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for sharing.
So Muhammad Musayyad, do you want to show us your logo as well? Yalla Muhammad, you can share your screen. Fatma Bahar, do you have a logo? Okay, can you sketch something quick to show us, please? Fatma. Muhammad, if you already share your screen, okay? We have Bayan as well. Hanan, are you with us? Hanan Jamil? Or Ali Hani as well. So please share your results. Zainab as well.
While everybody's drawing, I wanted to ask, it looks like there was a question in the chat about using color palettes from online pages.
Yes.
Can you clarify your question? Is that Fatima? Fatima?
Apparently she left, I guess. She left.
Oh, she had to leave. Oh, I'm so
Yeah,
sorry. I'll see
yeah,
if I can get in touch with her to help answer her question.
yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, Muhammad, yeah, this is Muhammad's logo.
Wonderful. And this is for you, for your personal brand, Mohammed?
Muhammad, can you answer? Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so this is your personal logo. So this is great. So this is very simple, very impactful, and it's definitely something I would, use maybe on your business card, put it at the top of your resume. I actually meant to get something out to show you guys, but when I go on job interviews, I have a physical portfolio book that I had printed, and I have my logo right on the front of that. So using that in multiple places to really kind of solidify, your brand, and using that blue color on everything you do, that's going to be really impactful to help, kind of sell yourself as a brand.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
Okay, so Zainab.
So I've just done this quickly. I'm an architect, so this like resembles the horizon, and then we can see the buildings up and down in a reflection. And it also reads in Arabic, so this is the first letter of my name, second, third, and last. So this is basically a dot, and then the curves are like up and down.
I absolutely love that. What a wonderful way to play with the reflections and with typing at the same time. That's wonderful. You should definitely flesh that out if you can.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
So can I share mine?
Of course.
So this is Cartoon Planet's logo. It has been there for at least 8 years now.
Yes. Oh, I love this logo.
Thank you. So what do you understand from that logo, Kim?
Well, I can tell that, you say it's Cartoon Planet. This is a planet. You are also showing us the speech bubble that you're going to see in a lot of comics and cartoons. So I really do feel like that conveys both, comics, cartoons, and the planet in one thing. And it's very simple and very bold. And like I said, you can tell exactly what it is on your Instagram page and that little itty bitty profile picture, but this would be just as wonderful and impactful on a huge billboard at, 30 feet wide. I absolutely love it.
So any room for improvement or development of that logo?
In this logo?
Yeah.
Oh, I would not change it at all. I like it. I love it just the way it is.
Thank you. So what about the 3 dots? Can you see them?
The 3 dots, yeah.
Yeah. So what can you see through them?
I see almost a face, kind of like,
Yeah.
like a surprised face. But what is it? What was the intention there?
Yeah, it's a face actually. Yes, exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah, but some people say it's a bowling ball, like that bowling. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, those people who aren't that into like cartoons or face expressions say it's a ball, like logo, like bowling ball. But like the people who are like excited or interested in that field, they directly say it's a face. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I love it. And
so
for me, I mostly just added texture to the image at first. I didn't see it as a face. I didn't see a bowling ball. I just kind of saw texture to that planet, and it gave it a little more detail, but just a hint of detail, and I like that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So here, who else, guys? We have 4 minutes. So can you speak, please, for during the remaining time? Can you speak about the golden ratio and how important is the golden ratio for graphic design?
What was that now? The golden ratio?
Yes.
Whew. I'm not sure I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's fine. It's totally fine. So what standard do you follow like to create your logos? Like, do you have any rules or standards or like anything to follow when it comes to like the sketch or the design of your logo?
Well, I think I said it best just, in my one previous slide, is that taking it to a simplistic level is really what's important. I know some people who have very beautiful logos, and on the right scale, they're wonderful and they're very impactful and they say a lot about the company. But they're just so busy. And once you bring it down to a smaller degree, you can't really read it anymore. You can't really tell what it is, and it becomes very muddled. So your example, your logo, Mohammed, it's very bold, it's very clear and concise. You're only using 2 colors. I think that that's one guideline I would say, is that you want to limit the amount of colors you're using in the logo. I don't think anyone should really use more than like 4 or 5, and that's even pushing it. Really using 1 or 2 colors is probably the best bet. Your logo only uses orange and white, Mohammed, that's perfect. Target, they're red and white. That's all you're going to see. You're not going to see the Target logo in blue. You're not going to see it in any other color. So yeah, really being able to take away the details and leave something that still conveys that message is what's going to make the best logo.
Thank you very much. So anyone else wants to share their logos or sketches? Fatma Bahar, are you ready, Fatma?
Yeah,
yes.
can I share?
Yes. Let's do
Okay,
it.
this one, my 2 logos. Can you see them?
Oh no, it's
No, we
disappearing.
can't.
My
It's getting lost in the virtual background.
How about now?
There we go.
Yes, love it.
Okay. Oh, I love it.
One
So you're
cafe
making.
and burger. Yeah.
I love it. So it's and the F is almost the handle of the mug.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I love how you've played with the type and you've given the F that swirl on the top, and the lines coming out of the coffee to can really drive that home, that that's what that is, a cup of coffee, and show that it's hot. That's wonderful. I love it. Thank you so much.
There's a burger logo as well. There's a burger logo, right?
That's a very good logo.
Love it. So do you have any feedback, Kim, or suggestions or recommendations to Fatima?
For that, no. I mean, I would actually try to flesh that out a little more. Maybe make the text a little bolder. Obviously, when you're working with hand drawing, you're kind of just going with the flow and you have the one line. But I would say maybe thicken up those letters a little bit, and then it would, pretty much be perfect.
Very good, very good. So anyone else, guys and girls? So because we reached the end of the workshop, so any questions? Okay, I think this is the,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
And if you guys think of any questions after today, you can definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn or Instagram. My handle is @CMYKim. And yeah, I'll be available if you guys have any questions about, getting into graphic design or any specific questions about the programs. Feel free to reach out.
Thank you very much, Kim. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Kim, for your great workshop. Bahraini people would like to thank you for your efforts. Thank you very much. The workshop was very great, beautiful, fruitful as well. So if in case you have any questions, guys, please reach Kimberly Schmidt on social media or on LinkedIn or email or website. She's everywhere, actually. So please reach her, reach Kim, because she has so many so much more to give you and to answer the questions as well. And she's very open and friendly and very, professional, and very, she has a very long career in the graphic design field. So any questions, please reach Kimberly Schmidt. So thank you again. Thank you very much, Kim. Thank you for your time, for your efforts.
Thank you all so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you. I will upload the recording as well on YouTube and send you the link as well. Thank you. Thank you, Kim. Thank you again. And see you soon. And pass my regards to Mohammed Al-Ghaib as well. Mohammed Jr. Thank you.
I will. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful time.
Bye-bye. See you.